First Officer's Log Supplemental. After Lieutenant DeWitt's pronouncement, we waited the 10 remaining minutes before our scheduled beam out. It has been 5 minutes since then. For whatever reason, it appears the Jemison is unable to retrieve us at this time. If I had to guess, I'd say the chronitons are beginning to cause issues with the ship's systems. I'm headed to find a viewport facing the Jemison in the hopes of getting a visual on the situation. Welcome back, everybody, to Part 3 of Belly of the Beast, a Star Trek Adventures Captain's Log mission. If you have missed out on either of the previous two parts of this particular mission, you can find those on my channel page or in the Star Trek Adventures Captain's Log playlist. We are, of course, resuming with Part 3 here. Lieutenant DeWitt just pronounced at the end of Act 2 that somebody would have to remain if they wanted to send the ship back to wherever it came from. Now we've learned through that first officer's log that there's something more going on. Whatever is going on the Jemison, they are not able to contact the away team. Alright. So, I think we're going to roll, again, because we don't know the exact layout of the ship, I think we're going to start with a roll to see if Commander Paulsen can find Actually, you know what? They've got access to the ship systems from the bridge. I think they can find a map, at least well enough. So I think she just walks to somewhere with a viewport and manages to catch sight of the Jemison. And as she does, the camera, which had been kind of over her shoulder the whole time, zooms out, and we see the Jemison sitting there in space. The lights shining through the windows are flashing. The warp cores seem like they're offline. So whatever's going on, it's bad. The warp cores being off are... that's not supposed to happen. So we're going to have a... and this will be a test from Lieutenant Reardon, I think, who's followed Commander Paulsen, just to see if Lieutenant Reardon, the chief engineer, can figure out exactly what's going on. So, she's got a... In this case, I think it'd be a reason engineering. Again, I think she's probably got a 14, a 10 in reason, and a 4 in engineering. So we're going to go ahead and roll for that and see what we get. 14 and a 13. Dice are going my way at the moment. So we have our next success. She turns to Commander Paulsen, and I'm just going to roll to see how bad it is. Oh, it's bad. 16. With 1 being good, at least in Star Trek Adventures. And she would say to Commander Paulsen that whatever's going on over there, it's clear to her that they've lost main power, and that even the lights are beginning to go out. And in a situation like that, if it really is chronitons causing problems, it's only a matter of time, pun not intended, before the ship loses all power, including life support. So the two of them would head back to the bridge and would meet back up with Dr. Bancroft and Lieutenant DeWitt. And we would have a moment where... And I think this is going to be... We could challenge a value here if we needed the momentum, which we don't. But I think Commander Paulsen would say to the 4 on the bridge... It's only a matter of time before the Jemison loses all power, including life support. If it comes to that, and our only option is to return this ship to wherever it came from, we have no option but to do it. I won't... At this point, we have no way to get back to the Jemison, so there's no need to draw straws. I certainly won't ask anyone to stay here of their own... against their will... Should we regain communications, the right R word, should we regain communications with the Jemison, I will remain behind and enact the procedure to get the ship back to wherever it came from. And I think the camera would pan, and only us viewers see this. I don't think Commander Paulsen or anyone else on board would see it. But I think the viewers would see Lieutenant DeWitt's eyes flick over to Commander Paulsen and then flick down to the phaser at his waist ever so briefly, and to maybe his tricorder as well. And we would see, us as viewers know that he's got something in mind. As to what, hopefully there's still a bit of mystery there. Commander Paulsen then asks Lieutenant Reardon roughly how long they might be able to expect before full power goes down, including life support. And based on the fact it's been about half an hour since they left and she doesn't know when this started, she's estimating about 20-25 minutes. So it's here that they're going to suggest, Commander Paulsen is going to suggest that they try to gain communications back for the next 20 minutes. And if all else fails, they'll come back to the bridge and take the ship out of here. So our next task is going to be I think everybody's going to have to chip in. So this is going to be Commander Paulsen's part of the task, trying to rig something up for either a transporter pattern enhancer, which isn't standard equipment in this era, or a communication device, and I think a pattern enhancer would be the most likely thing. They have to assume that the transporters are still operational, at least on limited power, but they're not able to punch through the chronoton field and the hull of the ship. So, what is Commander Paulsen bringing to this task? We could do the Presence command, that she is leading the operation, and I think that's a valid way to go. So I think we're going to do that, which would be a 15. We got a 3 and a 4. The dice are playing along. So with her direction, Lieutenant Reardon and Lieutenant DeWitt, who probably don't work together very often, being science and engineering, and for the record, scientists and engineers can work just fine side by side. It's those worlds are not different enough to cause problems. But they would very quickly manage to jury-rig something together. And I think I had thought about saying this ahead of time, that this would have required 2 successes to be fully realized in the short amount of time they were working with. But since we got 2 successes, I'm not too worried about that. So, let's see. Commander Paulsen would order Lieutenant Reardon to stand in the region covered by the pattern enhancer, and they'd wait for probably a minute with nothing happening, and then they would see her begin to dematerialize. And it's very obvious that it's taking longer than usual. It probably takes a good 10 seconds before she's completely dematerialized. And still no communications back. But Lieutenant Reardon has orders to inform the bridge of what's going on, and that Commander Paulsen will be fixing the situation as quickly as possible. And then she's going to head off to engineering to try and get main power back enough to punch through and hopefully beam Commander Paulsen back before the ship completely disappears. At least that's her goal. Alright. So with that, I think we would see then, let's see, where are we? We've got 3 to go. We would see Dr. Bancroft then transport out, and at the exact moment that Commander Paulsen orders Lieutenant DeWitt to go, he pulls a phaser on her and fires. And so he obviously has the initiative. She takes 1 damage. We're going to get into a combat. So let's get to the personal conflict flowchart. As he says, "I'm sorry, Commander. You're more important than I am. I'm the only one who can do this besides." And he's going to attack. I think he's... As a science officer, I think he's got a pretty good control. His security isn't great in all likelihood. But, let's see. There's a chance it's better. It's about the same as hers. He's got a 2. But I'd say he's got a higher control. His control and his reason are his 2 best stats. So they'd be an 11 and a 12. So we're looking at a 13 on this test. That's a 3. So that is a success. But I also rolled another 20. So that's another threat. And in this case, we're just going to spend the momentum and the threat to cancel everything out. because it's too complicated to remember otherwise. So he gets a hit on her. So she's now at 2 wound value. She's going to kind of charge forward and try to deck him. So this is going to be a daring security for an 11. That is a 17 and a 9. She does not have a focus, and it's irrelevant anyway, so she gets a hit. He's going to kind of stumble back as they begin to grapple, and is going to try and shoot her again. It's incredibly close range, but I don't think we need to worry about that too much. So once again, we're looking at a 13. And he does manage it just barely with a 9 and a 14. So she crumples to the deck plating, having been stunned. The camera then shows him pushing her into the circle. And as we were acting as him, I think we're going to count that as a failure. Yeah, we're going to count that as a failure because she did not win the combat. And this is her character sheet we're looking at, not his. So a moment later, she gets transported back to the transporter room, and we see Dr. Bancroft there being looked over by one of the nurses on board, and would see her turn, spot Commander Paulsen lying on... Actually, she would just spot the person in their EV suit lying, and for dramatic purposes, the EV suit is facing away from them, so her back is to the transporter room. And everybody starts rushing forward. They turn her on her back, and you see Commander Paulsen's face through the visor of the EV suit. We're now going to head back to the bridge of the alien ship, and we're going to see how the lieutenant does at getting everything to work. In this case, it's once again a reason engineering, so I think he's looking at a 14, 15. We'll see what the dice say. Doesn't matter, rolled a 1 and a 4. He is very successful, and the ship starts to head back to where it belongs. And finally, our last task, we're going to see if Lieutenant Reardon has managed to get power back to the transporters enough to punch through the ship's exterior and lock onto that last beacon. So this is going to require 2 successes. Yes, 2 successes. And it's a control engineering, which she's got a 11 and a 5, 11 and a 4. I think she's a 15. We'll call it a 15. It's a 4 and a 6. She is successful. So she does manage to pull Lieutenant DeWitt back. Whether he's a lieutenant by the end of this, who knows? All right. So here we are. Very quick act. But I'm going to go ahead and pause here real quick to write the closing log, and we will go over the last little bits of the story here. I'll be right back. First Officer's personal log. I've had no choice but to bring Lieutenant DeWitt up on charges for insubordination and assault on a superior officer. It brings me no pleasure. While I can appreciate the gesture of his act, Starfleet cannot operate without the chain of command. This isn't the first incident on the lieutenant's record, and there's a chance the Judge Advocate General Corps would recommend brig time for his actions. I have submitted a recommendation that the lieutenant instead be offered the chance to leave Starfleet with an honorable discharge. He's too good of a scientist to waste in the brig. On another note, Lieutenant Reardon has spent the last 3 days scrubbing every last trace of chronitons from the ship, both inside and out. There were a few more incidents of lost time before all was said and done. I still find myself wondering when that ship was from. Were the inhabitants human, or is there even any such thing as a human anymore? Maybe they're all so blended, genetically speaking, that such distinctions no longer matter. And that is going to do us for today's session of Star Trek Adventures Captain's Log and our mission Belly of the Beast. It took a few turns I wasn't necessarily expecting, but I think it ended up being a very interesting, thought-provoking session. We will again see, I should have a session up next Friday, which would be our 4th mission. Should have plenty of time to get that done before then. In the meantime, I hope you all have enjoyed Belly of the Beast, particularly this 3rd part. And remember, if you want to make sure that you don't miss out on any of the interesting missions that we end up with, make sure to hit subscribe on this channel. In the meantime, live long and prosper, and I'll see you soon.